steal in Florida, but it's going to be with us for some time.
Recount underway. We're continuing to watch the wildfires burning in California. Dow's down more than 400 points. The news continues. Keep it right here. Outnumbered starts now.
Fox News Alert, nearly 1 week since Election Day, and the midterm drama rages on in Florida. A statewide recount is now underway for 3 close races, with a focus on the Senate and gubernatorial contests. The lawsuits are flying, too. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Melissa Francis, former Director of Strategic Communications for the Hillary Clinton campaign, Adrian Elrod, host of Kennedy on the Fox News Business Network, Kennedy. And in the center seat, conservative radio talk show host Larry Elder is here. We say he is outnumbered. We observe Veterans Day on this day, and we thank our veterans, and we are glad you were with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's get to the news, shall we?
Shall we? Let's do it.
Right now, Florida counties are rushing to meet a Thursday deadline to count all of their votes. But Palm Beach County election officials are calling that time frame impossible. Meanwhile, there are allegations of misconduct and incompetence with a lot of attention on Broward County. Here's a look at the Broward County's Supervisor Elections Office. Boy, we get a live look at this every day now. They're still counting. Yep. President Trump today tweeted the Florida election should be called in favor of Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, and that large numbers of new ballots showed up out of nowhere, and many ballots are missing or forged. An honest vote count is no longer possible. Ballots massively infected must go with election night. Senate candidate Governor Rick Scott accused his opponent, incumbent Democrat Senator Bill Nelson, of committing electoral fraud. Watch it.
We won. Ron DeSantis won. We need to go forward and start thinking about our agendas. Bill Nelson is clearly a sore loser. He can't stand the fact that he's not going to be elected for the first time in decades, and he won't. He's just here to steal this election. That's what he's done. His lawyer came down here and said, "I'm here to win the election. I'm not here to get a free and fair election, make sure votes are counted." No, he wants to win the election. That's his only purpose.
A Nelson campaign attorney accusing Scott's campaign of trying to throw out lawful votes. And yesterday, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi responded to the president's allegations of possible voter fraud in the Sunshine State.
My experience with the president is any time he charges somebody with something, he's just projecting what he might have done himself. Obstruction, suppression of the vote, those kinds of issues are, I think, wrong and not in honor of our sacred right to vote. So no, there is no election fraud. What there is an honest count of the vote.
Griff Jenkins live at the Broward County Board of Elections. Boy, on Friday it was electric, and it looks like time has not moved.
It's not moving, Harris. The deadline is Thursday for the recount in all 67 counties in Florida. In Miami-Dade, neighboring, they're about halfway done. But here in Broward County, they haven't even gotten started. Let me show you what's happening here at the headquarters. You're looking at ballots being fed into the machines, but that's actually just the first step of separating page one of over 700,000 ballots. They spent most of the day dealing with the calibration of 2 new machines brought down from Tallahassee at 4 a.m. when I was here, and yet they still haven't started the actual counting of the ballots. They've got a long ways still to go. This is much in part to Governor Scott's lawsuit that is accusing, among other things, the supervisor of elections here, Dr. Brenda Snipes, over failing to account for the total number of ballots. She has been here. She was asked about whether or not she thought she would not meet that deadline. She said she's confident she will, but as you can see, things are moving slowly. The attorneys, the Democrat attorneys here, tell me that they have no doubt that Snipes' attacks are unwarranted, but they are calling for calm and patience when they try and get this underway. However, it is anything but calm and patient between the campaigns and the candidates themselves. You've got Senator Nelson's attorney, Mark Elias, tweeting just a little while ago about the Miami Herald, telling him that Elias has been the proven winner in recounts, quote, in 2 of the 3 recounts where the outcomes changed the recount. We were the winners. And you've got the Scott campaign firing back at them in an email saying that Governor Scott won by a margin mathematically impossible to close in a recount without fraud. So sparks are certainly flying. In fact, in that email, they accused Mark Elias of perhaps not having his name in the paper in a while. None of that is helpful as they try and get the process underway here, Harris, because when they separate this page one, and I know it's technical, but it's a process that has to happen before they begin the full recount. It is nothing but a clock ticking as they go 24/7 to try and get this done. And I should point out as well that the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections, Susan Booker, just north of us, saying she already believes it's going to be impossible to meet that deadline. Meanwhile, as people look at the expected margin of the outcome of this recount, we expect this likely to actually get to a hand manual recount. So it is, to say briefly, it is going to be a very, very long and complicated week. We've had a lot of meetings today as well where they were arguing over the security of the ballots and where they're kept here. Harris?
Yeah, I just wonder what happens when and if they miss that deadline, if they're going to start counting by hand. Whew. Griff Jenkins, thank you very much for bringing it out to the couch. Larry, what do you make of it all?
Well, it's a hot mess, isn't it? And the Broward County election supervisor has a track record of being accused of shenanigans. Look, it's not surprising that both sides are going to make accusations of fraud and deceit and corruption. Both sides dislike each other. It's not uncommon. But for people that are accusing the Republicans of engaging in conspiracy theories, I just have a couple of things I want to say. This is a party, the Democratic Party, a majority of whose members believe that George W. Bush lied us into the Iraq War, even though there's no evidence of that. This is a party, a majority of whose members believe not only that the Russians meddled, but that the Russians actually changed voting tallies, even though Jay Johnson, the Homeland Security Director under Obama, and James Clapper, his National Intelligence Director, both have said the Russians meddled, but no evidence whatsoever of changing voting tallies. Yet the majority of Democrats believe that's what happened. So for all the people saying there's no evidence of fraud, there's no evidence of this and that, make sure that you apply the same standard to your side as well.
Ooh, gosh, did everybody get hit by that drop mic?
Boy, that was quite the switch from talking about what's happening in Florida to what you think the Democratic Party stands for. And as a Democrat, I actually disagree with a lot of what you just said, especially when you're saying that the majority of Democrats feel that way.
Well, the polls show the majority of Democrats believe.
Oh, the polls show that. Okay.
Yeah, believe. I didn't just make it up. The majority of Democrats believe that George W. Bush lied us into the war. The majority of Democrats believe the Russians not only meddled, but that they changed voting tallies, even though there's no evidence of either. So for all the people saying that the Republicans are smoking this and smoking that, engaging in these unfair conspiracy theories, Democrats do it too.
All right.
And we all ought to be calm. We all ought to wait for the evidence before we make allegations.
Adrian, your rebuttal.
How about that?
Look, I actually want to focus on the topic at hand here, which is what's happening in Florida. Here's the bottom line. There's an automatic recount that happens when a race is this close, right? The Nelson Scott race goes into an automatic hand recount because it is so close. I think it's 0.25% is the margin that the state law mandates that you go into an automatic hand recount. So that is what is happening down here. Now, for one, the Broward County Board of Elections, there's always been issues there. But we're not talking about fraud. We are talking about too slow to count the ballots.
Okay.
Something else that we're also dealing with.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Something else I want to just point out.
That's an excellent point.
Is that a lot of the absentee ballots are coming in late, and they were still postmarked by November 6th. All of those should be counted, and that is what they're trying to achieve.
But in response to what you're saying, though, because you're talking about the law and what is the law, and that's what we have to file here, and you can't have it one way and not the other, because Brenda Snipes is violating state law on how elections are supposed to be done. That law is in place to discourage fraud. You know, whether or not it's happened, we're either following the law in every county or we're not. And she has broken the law repeatedly by not providing the total when she was supposed to. She didn't do that. We talk about an honest count, and an honest count, I mean, those laws are in place for a reason.
So why didn't the governor take care of this before with her, right? Because this also touched a Democratic primary in Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I mean, this hasn't just been about a split ticket, as we're seeing it here. There's been a hot mess, as Larry says, down in Broward County.
In Florida, as in many other states, it goes county by county, and they are allowed to have whatever system of voting and vote counting they want. There's a lot of discretion that's left up to the counties. Having said that, and I understand why Bill Nelson and Rick Scott are both so upset, because we've seen what can happen in Florida.
Yes.
We also know, and this I think is the most critical thing, we know these elections are so close. We know they are are razor thin, and all of the polling showed us that coming into these two races, and so has history. And if that's the case, make sure that you've got systems in place that are functioning. That is not a big ask. You know it's going to come to this, so make sure you've got voting machines that work. Make sure you've got ballot counting machines that work. But make sure you have people in place that know how to
Right.
I want to point to the screen there, Kennedy, because you're on with, well, you were for just a second there, with the vote count that's going on. But even if they got all of that right, how do you find 80,000 votes? Well, how do you find any votes? I know that there have been reports that there was a box in the back of a school.
All of a sudden it showed up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that human error isn't always at play in just about everything we do. And sometimes it's egregious, but they're going to hand count these by Thursday? That doesn't seem possible.
Well, that's why the law dictates these timing guidelines, though, because as time goes by, even if ballots do show up and they're completely valid, you don't know the chain of custody. You don't know where they've been. They may or may not be completely valid, but it undermines the whole system. And the point you were making is a great one, that a court ruled against Brenda Snipes for having destroyed ballots after she was ordered not to. And that was a Democrat versus Democrat race. This isn't about party. It's about believing in our system. And by the way, I mean, I think that the process around the mail-in ballots is terrible. I don't vote by mail-in, even though a lot of people do.
I vote by mail.
Because, I don't trust the postal system. I don't trust
in Oregon, it's all vote by mail.
I thought it might be complicated and complicating, and I don't know because I've never had to do a vote count or a recount. But when you have 38 million people vote early in a midterm, you would hope that what's happening on the back end, even if it is historic, is going to be handled better than
absolutely.
Right? I mean, they didn't even have to deal with 100% of the votes.
And
lock it up.
Yeah.
Exactly. And lock it down, lock it up. Make sure your game is strong. But even so, and what Melissa's saying is so true, outside of some guidelines and some laws and some rules, would we be counting votes like in February? Like, well, where would it end?
There are rules, and your ballot and these mail-in ballots, they're very explicit. Your signature has to match the signature at the registrar's office.
But what about the people who went to vote?
And if they don't match, your ballot doesn't count. That's not counting every vote when they have been improperly executed by the person who is voting.
Oh,
if you can't follow the rules, then unfortunately,
don't do it that way.
And if Democrats are saying our voters are so incompetent, they can't follow basic instructions, therefore their votes should be counted. I mean, that is just insulting.
Kennedy, to your point about why this election official is still there, the Republican governor could have replaced her.
Well, that was my question. Why didn't he?
He did not. And I'm looking at allegations of racism because she happens to be black, allegations.
Wait a minute. You're saying he didn't replace her?
No, he didn't. He could have. He had the power to replace her after she got convicted of violating the law, Brenda Snipes. He could have replaced her.
Why didn't
he? He didn't. In my opinion, one of the reasons is because he feared that if he had done so, he would have been accused of racism. I'm looking at charges right now. Brenda Snipes has already brought up the race card. What do you think? We can't do this because most of our voters are black?
I don't think we have to go there.
I'm sure the governor didn't want to touch it.
Well, they are race cards because these are Senate and gubernatorial races. That's the race that counts here, the one that people voted in. I mean, we don't want Americans to lose faith in the voting process. That's what makes this
We also had an overwhelming turnout. We also had an overwhelming turnout in this midterm election.
Yes.
That is one of the reasons why this is taking so long. I'm not going to sit here and defend
county. Why only
$1 billion?
You can certainly agree, you could make the argument, the very legitimate argument, but maybe these should not be partisan offices who are overseeing the electoral counts.
It didn't make a difference when she was, adjudicating the vote for Democrats.
But what truly matters at the end of the day is that every single vote that is
how long should you give that process?
What matters is the law is
followed. Do we go forever, or can we just stop at Thursday?
I think it needs to go on as long as every single vote that was cast by November 6th,
change the law,
including the absentee ballots.
That's the reason. But they have these timing firewalls in place, so you can't have, as Larry refers to it, as shenanigans, and those can't be overridden.
But it's not the fault of the voters that these shenanigans may have taken, or that some sort of
somebody is
going
to hashtag shenanigans.
The voters are incompetent, and they don't fill things out properly, and they don't follow the rules.
Patrick Murphy, who's a member of
After 2000, Florida should have figured all of this out. Broward County should have figured all of this out, so it doesn't come to this because you know they're going to be close races.
Why should they be punished for it? Because the Broward County elections
don't fill out a ballot properly.
Well, there are a couple counties involved.
Why should their vote be counted when they can't follow basic instructions?
Well, the signature
because
issue is a big
and
complication.
It's sad. And sometimes you have to follow rules. And when you don't get the thing you want.
Look, Patrick
it's
Murphy
part of
is a
active
Democrat from
citizenship.
Florida.
We're going to move on, guys. We're kind of going in circles, but $5 billion with a B dollars were spent.
And none of us live in Florida and we're this fired up.
$5 billion with a B
What fun.
spent in midterms. Somebody should spend some of that money on shoring up that this doesn't happen in the future. We could spare like $1 billion probably.
Claudia Cowan is live in what is left of Paradise, California. Claudia.
Well, Melissa, here along the main drag in Paradise, almost every single building has burned to the ground, and now a grim recovery effort is underway because 5 days later, more than 200 people are still unaccounted for, and authorities say that death toll, now at 29, could very well rise. The Butte County Sheriff, who also serves as the county coroner, is asking anxious families to be patient while the remains are identified.
I know that members of our community who are missing loved ones are anxious, and I know that the news of us recovering bodies has to be disconcerting. I will tell you that we are doing everything we possibly can to identify those remains and make contact with the next of kin.
Go because they say extreme fire behavior is still possible. Back to you.
So devastating, Claudia. Thank you. Democratic leaders are ramping up pressure on newly named acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker to step aside from overseeing Robert Mueller's investigation. A letter to the DOJ's chief ethics officer, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and other top Democrats ask if any Justice Department ethics attorney have advised Whitaker to recuse himself. They also demand details on any ethics guidance Whitaker has received. Since Whitaker's appointment last Wednesday, Dems have accused President Trump of trying to undermine Mueller by installing a Trump loyalist and critic of the probe to oversee it. Here's Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer.
I am sending a letter along with Leader Pelosi to the chief ethics officer of the Justice Department, asking him to issue guidelines should Whitaker recuse himself from anything involving Mueller. He issued guidelines like that with Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions recused himself. Whitaker should.
But Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway telling Fox News Sunday that Whitaker's criticism of Mueller is a thing of the past. And given this answer when asked if the president has brought up the Mueller probe with the acting attorney general.
The president said he has not discussed the Mueller investigation with Whitaker. He's made that very clear the other day. I believe somebody asked him that question. I've never been witness to them discussing it, and I'll go a little bit farther. It would be a mistake to try to shut down the Mueller investigation in the way that you describe it, because we've been so compliant.
All right, Larry, I'll ask you. Whitaker's cable and op-ed opinions and appearances, Democrats say show bias. Is that fair?
Shockingly, Democrats are accusing the Republicans of trying to undermine the Mueller investigation. No, it's not fair. The man that Democrats believe should have been left in charge of this investigation is Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein, the deputy AG, has just said that Matt Whitaker is a, quote, superb, close quote, choice to succeed me, to oversee this investigation. That he was competent and had the loyalty of the members of the DOJ. And so this is the guy that the left is pointing to, Rod Rosenstein, as the guy that they feel is the firewall. He's the one who's going to make sure that the Mueller investigation goes forward. He has called Whitaker superb.
What do you think of that?
Look, I completely agree with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi here. I think their letter simply says, issue to the ethics officer at the Department of Justice, please issue guidelines. We are looking for your objective opinion on this. That is the least that I think that
what would the guidelines say? That you should recuse yourself, or what are you looking for in those guidelines? Or make sure you separate this and that? I mean, what would they say?
I mean, I would assume based on what the office issued for Sessions that it would sort of be in the same line, since Matthew Whitaker has made some very biased statements about the Mueller investigation. But, you know, this shouldn't be that hard to do, right? There are other people who can oversee this investigation. You might not have the same bias. And I think simply asking the ethics chief, essentially, at the Justice Department to make this determination. It's not like Nancy and Chuck are saying we're making this determination. They don't have that authority. They are simply asking the objective officer at the Department of Justice to make that decision.
Does it mean anything, though, that Rod Rosenstein thinks that it's okay to have him in charge when Rod Rosenstein is somebody who he's pretty tangled up in it? He seems like he would be on the opposite side.
Does it mean anything?
I mean, does it make anyone feel any better that he thinks Whitaker's okay? If Rod Rosenstein's the one that he signed the FISA warrant,
I need somebody to educate me on the line, Adrian, where bias is okay and where it's not. I just need for you to tell me the rules, because at the FBI, when you had those
Strzok and Page
and Strzok texts, those paramours, those lovers outside their marriages,
the investigation.
Not immediately. No, that's not true. They had access, as far as we've been able to ascertain, to their clearances even. No, that they were not immediately
and the IG,
fired.
And Harris, the IG
They were
report.
moved around like chess pieces. But my question is, where is the line on bias? Why is there more comfort with that, and the idea that at the DOJ, Bruce Orr's wife worked for the anti-Trump opposition research firm, and that they might have shared some things with one another? They were married. I'm just wondering, where's the line on bias?
Well, look, the line is not for me to determine. It is to be determined by the ethics officer at the Department of Justice.
But you're calling out bias on a man that we've seen an op-ed from.
He was all over, just like we were saying, he was all over cable television. He was making his points very clear in terms of where he stood on the Mueller investigation. His bias that he didn't think that it was warranted and that it should stop. And now he's literally...
You realize he's in front, right?
Yeah. These purity tests lead to such hypocrisy. I understand there may be some issues with what Matthew Whitaker has written and what he has said, but is that a basis for recusal? I don't think it has been proven that it is. And if we are so concerned about conflicts of interest, then at least be honest about the ones that Rod Rosenstein has, because they are legion. You know, you're talking about someone who not only launched the Mueller investigation and picked Bob Mueller, but someone who is also signing FISA warrants, which are critical to the investigation itself. He's also the one overseeing the entire thing. So if that's not, if those questionable elements aren't grounds for recusal, I don't know what is. And to say that somehow what Matthew Whitaker has said and written is somehow a greater violation than Rod Rosenstein, then I think that we are done with rules, that everything is completely subjective, and we just go to a form of crude tribalism, and you have one giant loser and one ultimate winner, and that flip-flops and exacerbates the political unhappiness that already exists in this country.
Well, and it isn't, I shouldn't say it's just an op-ed, right? But he's an interim player. We know this.
He's been on all over cable news. I think he had a contract with CNN. I mean, he's been talking a lot about his feelings toward the Mueller investigation for quite a while. So I just don't think he should be the one who's overseeing.
So is John Bolton. Does that mean he shouldn't be national security advisor because he's had an opinion?
We got to leave it there. New questions about the expected investigations when Democrats take over the House amid a report that they are planning to load a, quote, subpoena cannon to probe every aspect of President.
She's related to President Trump that has come up. The Space Force.
Yes.
James Comey's firing.
Yes.
The travel ban.
Yes.
The family separation policy.
Absolutely.
Hurricane relief in Puerto Rico.
Oh, it was absolutely inadequate.
White House staff use of personal email.
Oh, for sure.
The president's business dealings abroad.
Absolutely. And I want to see his tax return.
There you go.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi told The Atlantic that President Trump could still be impeached even as special counsel Robert Mueller does not find anything to indict him for. Wow, Elijah Cummings and Nancy Pelosi could not be on more opposite ends of the spectrum, so it would seem.
So it would seem. Look, this is going to be 2 years of battle royale. Everybody's going to be lawyering up. There'll be subpoenas all over the place. I even heard that the Democrats want to investigate Trump's attack on CNN. I mean, my goodness. How are they going to restrain people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? How are they going to restrain people like Maxine Waters?
I don't think they're going to try, Adrian. I think they're going to try by distraction. I mean, I had on Carolyn Maloney last week, and representative, very close friends with Nancy Pelosi, and she said, you know, we'll be able to control or contain, was her word, that side of the party. It's not a problem, but it is a problem.
Look, Democrats can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Oh, no, not that phrase. Please, another phrase.
I'm always say that on the couch. We don't chew a lot of gum on the couch. I don't know why that keeps coming up.
Because there is this misperception that Democrats are going to come in here and only focus on subpoenas, and that is not going to be the case.
That's all they're talking about.
At all. Well, they're getting asked about this.
So what else are they going going to do? Okay, so they're
what do
chewing
politicians
gum,
normally do
and
when
they're
going to
go on a
something
walk.
they don't want to answer? They answer with what they really want to talk about. If you really have a great economic message, then say, you know what? Let's not talk about that right now. Let's look at this tax plan that's really going to help out the middle class. Isn't this fantastic? Let's take this economic growth we've had and capitalize on it in the way that only we can. I'm not a Democrat, but I do a much better job of coming up with talking points than you guys, because all you do is say walk and chew gum at the same time, and then you have these disparate messages where Nancy Pelosi on one end is like, we all need to work together, I love America, no investigations, and then she's like, it doesn't have to be an indictment to be an impeachment. So she's saying two things, but I think she's revealing what she really wants to do, which is rerun the 2016 campaign, and then she gets President Pence, who is much more popular on the Hill. Good job, Nance.
Well, all of that being said, look, Nancy, if you listened to her interview yesterday, Elijah Cummings, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler all made the Sunday show rounds, and Nancy made it very clear. I am going to focus on what the American people voted Democrats in to do, which is to fix health care, which is to address the opioid crisis, which is to raise wages. We're going to work with Republicans because we have to across the aisle, because Republicans still control the Senate and the White House.
Why don't you start with infrastructure, where you can be in the middle?
And infrastructure, too.
Like, if you really want to work with Republicans, why don't you start with something that you think you can get a deal on?
But
it breaks my brain.
There are a lot of voters out there who wanted to see the president held accountable.
You know what voters want to see? They want to see a Congress that can actually get something done.
They sure do. Absolutely.
Well, I don't know about that, because they like mixed government a little bit. First of all, I want to say that my friend Adrian's a very good sport, because everybody yells at her at the same time.
No.
Yes. And I happen to love Adrian.
We all do.
I would also say that it might be frustrating for Democrats as they do this, because so many times I've seen a party come in and they're very excited about going in and finding the answers and transparency, and they're going to litigate the past wrongs, and they're usually right about whatever past wrong, whatever party it is, but there's never any satisfaction. There is never any satisfaction. They don't get to the end of an investigation. Everybody ignores the subpoenas. No one is ever held accountable, and it's just very frustrating.
Well, look, Lindsey Graham and others have said you can impeach, but it only makes that person's numbers go up and the other side go down.
Especially this president.
Yeah, and that was exactly the experience. All right, some incoming House Democrats may be forced to back away from their promise of change amid a new report that Nancy Pelosi's critics are struggling to find a leader to challenge her for House Speaker.
We need the strongest general that we have. We need the best tactician. We need the best organizer.
And you believe that's her?
And that's her. There's no one else, honestly, that comes close.
Adam Schiff doesn't mean that. California Democrat Adam Schiff throwing his support behind Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. This is a small group of House Democrats are plotting against her for the speakership role. Another Pelosi supporter, Congressman Jamie Raskin, says no one is stepping up to challenge her. And, quote, in politics, nobody is perfect, including Nancy Pelosi. But the basic rule is you can't beat somebody with nobody. That's the problem with Nancy skeptics. But one of the leaders in opposition to a Pelosi speakership, Democratic Congressman Ed Perlmutter, he disagrees, saying, quote, we have a lot of great diverse candidates from all across the caucus who would be fantastic as our next speaker. They just need the opportunity to rise up and step forward. Elijah Cummings, poised to chair House Oversight, also backs Pelosi partly because of her gender.
Now that we have all of these women coming into the Congress, it would be a damn shame that you then replaced this fearless leader with a man. It's her time, and again, she's battle tested, and I'm looking forward to working with her as my speaker.
She is battle tested, like one of them World War I ships, huh?
Oh my goodness!
How about that? So let's talk a little bit about this, because there really isn't anyone bold enough who could get the votes to step forward and unseat her. Why is that?
Well, look, I think if Joe Crowley had been reelected, if he won his primary, I think he would have presented a strong challenge. But look, she's a formidable force. I mean, all this talk, we heard this in 2008. When Democrats gained more seats in the House after she'd been Speaker in 2006, that, we're going to present this challenge, we might win. Nobody ever does. She has a huge force in the caucus. She's very well respected. And frankly, as a Democrat who's been working in politics for a long time, I'd like to see somebody who has the experience that she has coming in to really work with these new freshman leaders. No, I'd like to see her as Speaker. But what I do want to see is her give this next generation of new leaders in Congress more of a voice. And I think that is important.
It's interesting because the president has said that if there are Democrats who defect in the voting process in the secret House Speaker ballot, that he'll throw some Republicans. Obviously, the president wants Nancy Pelosi to be House Speaker. Why is she so polarizing, and why do Republicans want her back in the top job so badly?
Well, she's polarizing because she's from San Francisco. She's got left-wing views or views that are perceived to be left-wing on the part of the Republican Party. She wants single payer. She wants a $15 minimum wage. She wants a free tuition. These are policies that are pretty far to the left, and Nancy Pelosi epitomizes those, and Donald Trump wants her to stay in that position. But I agree with Adrian. She has earned it. She's savvy. You had a really good night on Tuesday. She helped to engineer that, and so I don't see anybody coming up to beat her. And what's going to be their message? We're opposed to single payer. We're opposed to higher minimum wage. We're opposed to the president's separation policy on the border. We now like that. What are they going to say?
Well, Nancy has been a one-woman gaffe machine lately, and
she raises a lot of money too.
Well, a lot of politicians have a problem with foot in mouth. She has a situation though, and I go back to you, Adrian, on the socialist wing of your party. So your argument is she should be speaker because the one guy who could have challenged her got beaten by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
No, I'm not saying that's why she should be speaker. I'm saying that he might have been the one person who could have defeated her in that race.
What is the irony in that? He couldn't beat someone who'd never been in politics in the Bronx. Like, how's he going to take on Nancy Pelosi with all of her money?
A socialist who's never held on.
So did Nancy Pelosi help Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez win that election?
It's an interesting question.
No.
So Congresswoman Maloney said that Cortez does not support Pelosi. What is going to happen in your party? Isn't there somebody who can bridge the gap?
Well, look, I think a lot, and we saw this again. I worked at the Democratic Congressional Committee in 2006 when Democrats took back the House, and we had a lot of candidates that cycle who said, I'm not going to support Leader Pelosi as Speaker, blah, 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 and then they got in and they did. So they can vote against her if they feel like that's the right thing that they need to do for their home, local district politics, and
but she's inevitable?
But she is inevitable.
Here.
You know, it would be very tough for me were I a Democrat looking at this to try and figure it out, because on one hand, she is so great at whipping the votes, and she's so great at leading that party, and she holds everybody together, and she's great at fundraising. So I would want her to be in charge of the party. At the same time, how do you get somebody new in there who can start to get a face and start to get ready to be like,
you don't think she'll job share?
Great candidate. Well, I mean, do you still give people sort of the runway to get out there and develop the bench and become those
very important. I'm so glad that you raised that, Melissa, because it is so important that not just Leader Pelosi, but the entire slate of Democratic leaders in the House help groom this, this new class of people coming in.
And their combined age is older than dirt.
Leadership.
But it's tough for Nancy Pelosi because in the past she has been the pack master. She has been the lead dog with a series of sled dogs who get in line behind her to do the job. But now they just elected a bunch of cats.
What about?
So how is she going to hurt them?
Clyburn out of South Carolina.
Yeah, Jim Clyburn, much more interesting than Steny Hoyer.
I mean, who would you pick if those two ran against each other?
I love them both. Fortunately, I don't have to vote in this, so.
You don't know. He could pop up. Let's see what happens.
I think that Clyburn should really post that flag and make a run for it.
We'll cover it.
All right. Absolutely. Democrats, speaking of which, across the country, catching Beto fever, calling for the
Melissa, thank you. I'm about to talk with a sheriff in Northern California. He'll give me the latest on the battle with a raging wildfire that is now tied for the deadliest in California state history. 29 people killed there and counting. 2 in Southern California in a separate fire. The one up north keeps growing. Plus, the likely incoming head of the House Judiciary Committee has threatened to subpoena the man President Trump just named acting attorney general. Why is he doing that? And would that be a good move, or could it backfire? More at the top of the hour. Outnumbered Overtime. Melissa?
Harris, thank you.
I am as inspired, I'm as hopeful as I have ever been in my life, and tonight's loss does nothing to diminish the way that I feel about Texas or this country.
Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke last week after Ted Cruz defeated him in the Texas Senate race, but could he win by losing? Democrats across the country say the former Texas Senate candidate has the potential to take the 2020 presidential primaries by storm. What do you think?
Look, it might be unusual for somebody to have lost a Senate race to run for president, but he actually, in my view, didn't lose this race because he only lost by a couple points in Texas. against Ted Cruz in a state that is solidly red, which is obviously trending more blue now at this point. But look, if he wants to run, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who wants to run in the Democratic primary should. I think he does because he has such a national name ID, huge recognition. He's a very inspirational figure. I think a lot of people are really looking for somebody to inspire them. I also think it's not bad when you don't have a huge voting record. He only served in Congress, I think, for a term, right? Or maybe 2 terms. So he's got, he's still...
less baggage.
Yeah, less baggage. And he's just got this huge force of supporters throughout the country who are with him.
He had a lot of money, and certainly...
It's no less crazy than a businessman who's never held elective office named Donald Trump to run and win.
Yeah.
Part of it is he's a fresh face. Part of it is he raised a boatload of money, I think more money than any Senate candidate in history.
38
million
million in
he
Q3.
came close to winning Texas,
right.
although he did lose the race. In 2000, when Republicans went to Texas to get George W. Bush to run, he had become a 2-term governor in a state with a heavy Hispanic population. That's why they wanted him to run. This guy lost. Bush won. We'll see.
Yeah. Kenny, what do you think?
I actually don't think that he bests Kamala, sorry. I think that she has the best strategy of all the Democrats right now. And, she has a more impressive resume. And what you have to look at for 2020 is a candidate who's going to swing in the absolute opposite direction of President Trump. And if the Democrats don't get someone elected in 2020, they will in 24. And it will be an opposite person, opposite in temperament and, certainly policy-wise. And I don't think Beto is as electric as people think he is. I think the seat was so incredibly important to try and flip the Senate for Democrats. And they were hoping they could do that that was a must-win race for them. And he didn't win despite all that money. It is an interesting time politically, but there are no sure things.
Right.
And I don't think that he has enough of an internal column to withstand a presidential campaign.
There are a lot of people who are going to run, and they're not going to stand aside for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren's not going to stand aside. Joe Biden's not going to stand aside. Cory Booker's not going to stand aside. Kamala Harris is not going to stand aside. There are a whole bunch of people who are not going to stand aside from somebody who ran and lost a race.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to stand aside. I mean, it's going to be a big fight, and we'll see which personality.
It would be easier for Democrats if they could, because that way they could really just take all of that money at the beginning.
There you go.